Thank you all for voting in my contest. This month marks the 4-year anniversary of where I started using my voice in my videos. And what better way to celebrate the occasion with a countdown of my best and worst moments in my videos. This is not by my judgment, this is what you voted on. I'm going to start with the best and then get to the worst and alternate between them. With that out of the way, let's start with the best. My countdown of my top 10 favorite bug Pokemon is what several people refer to as what was my best work back in the year of 2011, especially when you compare it to some of my other lists that were made that year. I chose my entries wisely, choosing 2 bug Pokemon per generation so I wouldn't be as biased, and I put an intro and an end joke, which was new for my countdowns. Well, as long as you don't count the 2011 version of my top 10 worst video game cliches list, but that list was so bad that I deleted it the day after it was uploaded. Okay, I'll get back on topic. This, on the other hand, would be my first real time doing that stuff. I also had a wise choice in the music and transition clips. I probably could put Beedrill on the list rather than putting Venomoth on, the reason being because it was the only Pokemon that can learn a decent bug move back in its generation, so it might as well be your best bet against Psychic-type Pokemon back in that generation. But my list of the top 10 bug Pokemon was good. Not to pat myself on the back. The top 10 games I don't like as much as everyone else does. It should have been an improvement over my first 2 lists, but it got worse reception because I sometimes barely elaborated at all, especially at the Mario Party 2 segment. I still think that Mario Party 2 gets too much praise. Heck, now I think it deserves higher, but my only reason for including it were being praised as the best and that I preferred the first one. Some other reasons I neglected to bring up were that I brought luck-based games in, and how they lazily reused many minigames from the first game. Another thing I did wrong was when I got my facts wrong. I didn't take into account that Donkey Kong Jr. was an arcade game, so of course it will be outdated. I hate how they make you feel terrible for playing the first game, but yeah. And I needed to bring up many more reasons for not liking Crash 1. Don't worry, I'll bring up a couple more when I make my 2014 games list. Top 9 Mario RPG games is an example of how I can do a good job when I try. One thing was how I put in music montages for the first part and for the transition. And there aren't many times where you see a top 9 Mario RPGs list, so that makes it at least somewhat unique. And I'm quite surprised that a bunch of YouTubers were okay with me putting Bowser's Inside Story number 9. Though there were a few that were disappointed by that. And I'm flattered that some of my subscribers agreed with me when I said that Partners in Time is underrated. Not saying you have to agree with me, just pointing out. And I got some comments saying that they thought the joke I put in the end was really funny, and I'm proud of myself for that. I just wish that all these other Nintendo haters would hear that joke, so that they would be more understanding of us for happening to enjoy Nintendo games. Want to know how not to make a Halloween countdown? Don't do what I did in my top 10 scariest video game moments list. As freaky as I found these moments, some of them didn't even qualify. Why? Back then I didn't know that there's a difference between scary and disturbing. But whatever the title, that wouldn't have saved it from having the fatal sin of having the music only play in one earphone. You see, at the time, I recorded the music with my Wii U gamepad, thinking it would make better quality music and not pick up the static in the background. That made it worse, by only having the music play in one earphone. And there wasn't enough suspense in the video. I don't exactly know what to do to build up suspense to make a video more entertaining, but the video... yeah, I can see why you hated it. And I kept saying stuff like, that's just morbid, and that's just wrong, which got annoying after a while. The original list of my annoying bosses got some relatively decent reception, but the 2014 remake of the list was much better. This was because I played more games ever since I uploaded the 2011 version of it. I could bring in a large amount of more choices, including ones from games that came out after my original list. This especially since I wasn't as overreacting to copyright as I used to be, allowing me to include the trash monster and the giant flea bot. Not only that, but this was the first time in a countdown where I recorded footage from video games without the music and leaving the sound effects, making me have somewhat of a unique style. Plus, this is the point of my role in the countdown community where I made my speech a bit less redundant. Instead of saying the same description words, I looked through my scripts to make sure that I didn't use a certain term and or phrase too much, and if I did, I would rephrase it. Those are some major improvements over the first version of my list. Guys, I have a confession to make. I don't hate Skyward Sword. Not anymore. I thought I did because I didn't think about it enough, but after thinking about it, I do love this game. It has its flaws, but overall I love the game. Most of my complaints were stupid, but my most controversial one was the statement about how jumping off Skyloft to summon your Loftwing will teach children that they'll be able to fly if they jump off a cliff. I brought that up because I remembered Nightwing01 bringing that up in his Let's Play of the game, which, when I think about it, that was probably a joke that I was taking too literally. I overlooked the game's rating of E10, so a kid who would believe that would likely not be old enough to play the game. And even if a kid were to do that, that would kind of be the parents' fault for not keeping a close eye on their kids. Someone committing suicide because of this game would be highly unlikely, and it was a very stupid statement that I made. And I'm surprised this was the only entry on the list that was merely one moment and not an entire video. There's only one defensive argument I have for this. Some people said that the Skyward Sword entry of my Zelda games list ruined my entire countdown and not bothering to judge my other 13 entries. Oblivious to how one entry won't ruin an entire list. Still, I messed up big time here. Out of all the countdowns that made it to my best works list, my top 15 DS games might be my favorite out of the 5 that were voted. I am very proud of how much work I put into this solid countdown, and how I talked about some of my favorite DS games. I could have played Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush Adventure before making it, and Shantae Rescues Revenge maybe could have qualified for the list. I currently don't know where they'd go yet, but they'd definitely be on my DS games list. If I had played those games when I created my DS games list, the countdown probably would be a top 20, and there would be even more choices. One thing I could have improved on was going with my gut at times. I'm still glad about the order at times, but I think I put Guardian Signs too low. I'm still very proud that I created this countdown because of how much I elaborated, and because I got to talk about games that I really love. Warning, the following entry contains two old dramas in the commentary community. Click the timer in the description if you want to skip over this entry, unless you don't mind. Meta 537 the second commentary, Roshitsu and Supersonic 407 don't make a good team. This commentary's flaws pretty much sum up the flaws in my earlier commentaries. Boring voice, long parts where I say nothing, overreacting to copyright, little to no research. That's a formula for something. My voice was so boring back then because I wanted to keep calm, but that made me sound boring. And I'd have much more points if I refuted Chief Shadow at times, but I didn't because he hated being reminded of the commentary, despite how people watching my commentary could take notes from the points I wanted to say to him. And I was so paranoid that I censored not only the 3-second Alice in Wonderland clips that Chief Shadow used, and even censoring pictures. This only ended up confusing the audience, and some research on Game Dude would make my points more valid. All I knew was that he was an AVGN-inspired user who people say is an angry video game nerd ripoff. Another thing is that I completely missed my chance to commentate on Shadowstar's commentary. If I commentated on Shadowstar, I would have made a bucket load of counterpoints because of how nitpicky he was. But no, I decided to go after Wave's commentary, partially because of that end insult where he accused Roshitsu and Supersonic 407 of doing the commentary because they got butthurt that Game Dude got criticized. I still think it was very immature of him to accuse them, but who's to say that that makes me much better? Probably the most laughable aspect about the commentary was how I came off as if I was doing the commentary for the sole purpose of defending Rashitsu. And yes, that commentary was made in the time where I was an obsessed Rashitsu fanboy. I'll admit one thing though, it's funny thinking about how much epic fail my commentary was filled with, but I hate the amount of wasted opportunities in this commentary. I would do a commentary on my own commentary on Wave, but because all these dunces invented a rule against commentating on yourself no matter what the intention, I can't refute the other flaws. This wasn't really all that surprising to some of you, but you guys were the ones who chose this as my #1 best work. According to my viewers, my #1 best work was top 5 Pokemon generations. A lot of my subscribers were happy with the amount of work I put into my generations list and how very well done it was. They also loved all the elaboration I did, and I'm honestly surprised that a large amount of people agreed with my choice for #1, and with how even the people who disagreed with my bottom choice were perfectly okay with the generation I put as my least favorite Pokemon generation. And they could completely understand the points I was trying to make, even if they did disagree with me. While I did bring up some arguments that everyone else had already pointed out, at the same time I brought up a few somewhat original arguments. Examples being the time we have to get enough money to get into the Safari Zone, and about the saving a lot of data feature. If I had waited until Generation 6 to come out, that generation would have been #3 on the list, above Generation 4 but lower than Generation 5. Personally, I wouldn't call this my best work, but by the votes you sent in, this was my best work. Unfortunately, now that we finished talking about what you selected as my best work, now we're about to talk about what you selected as my worst work. This was an obvious choice, but you voted that my worst work is my Kingdom Hearts Recoded rant. Where do I even begin with this lousy excuse of a rant? Do I still think that Recoded is a terrible game? Yes, and being a remake of a cell phone game doesn't excuse the game. Did I do a good job at pointing out the game's flaws? No, my rant was filled with nitpicks, like how the data worlds look too pixelated despite being the point, and nitpicking about no footprints in the sand. This is what happens if you get too much inspiration from Game Dude. I wanted people to laugh at my jokes, but if anything, they only laughed at my failure. At the end, I said they ruined the song The Other Promise, saying they cut out the best part. They didn't. That part was actually in the final mix of Kingdom Hearts 2, while Recoded was using Roxas's theme, which was made before The Other Promise. One of the most controversial points was my complaint about cannibalism. We had to go inside Data Riku's stomach. I should clarify this, like cannibalism, for Data Sora is inside Data Riku's stomach, but not necessarily cannibalism. But the worst part of the rant was when I spewed this line. This is Met527, and I'll leave you with this line. Do not buy Kingdom Hearts Recoded. Did I seriously say that? What was I thinking? The reason I said the line was because I wanted to be dramatic, but it backfired and instead presented me as a disrespectful snot. I despise this game and it's definitely one of my most hated games, but my rant on the game was a terrible rant, and it deserves its spot on the worst mistakes I've ever made in my videos. If there's something I learned, it's that when making a big project, I should do more research. I'll think about that for when I decide to make my most hated Zelda characters list. But I should wait until Zelda Wii U comes out this year so I can form a fair opinion. Wait, hold on. I'm getting an important message. Wait, Zelda Wii U has been delayed until 2016 to come out? I can't wait that long to make my hated Zelda characters list. I want to make it as soon as possible. You know what? Forget it. I'll make the list be my next countdown anyways, Zelda Wii U or not.